I remember growing up, you would see all these tech companies. I remember, in the 90s, right? The computer was just starting, the 56K dial-up. And I remember always thinking, this is so cool, like looking around and seeing these companies built, but I was like 8, right? And I just remember thinking I kind of missed it, right? I was just too young. And I remember when I was in college, same thing. I saw like Facebook starting to become a thing, and all the other social media apps coming after that. And I was still too young. Right, and so I'd always wondered, would I be able to time a wave where I'd be at the prime of my working years and I'd be able to catch something that would be like the gold rush, basically, and I think we're all pretty lucky here. We're here for Columbia Business School. I imagine most of you guys are students at the school, which means that, you guys are in the prime of your working years. And you just got lucky. Right? You just happen to time it that at the prime of your working years, there is this industry that's just opening up and it's growing so fast. It's mind-blowing. It's faster and more energetic than what I saw with Facebook, than what I saw with the tech companies when I was 8 years old. And it's a really special time. And I think we all kind of feel that. Everyone that's here, we kind of think that. And so we wanted to put together this event for you guys. We're here with Nillion, and we're here with Andrew, who's a co-founder of Nillion. And Nillion is basically Andrew's new big project. And so I'll let David give an introduction to Andrew, but I want to give you some high-level things so we can kick this thing off. So there's a bunch of guys that are tuning in from Zoom. Maybe you're tuning in on Zoom, welcome. A few things, you can actually click on the different parts of the screen so you can zoom in on different parts. And you can also put questions in the question box. So after Andrew talks, we're going to have a moderator just reading off the questions that you guys put into the box. So if anything comes up during the presentation, feel free, drop it in. And obviously for the guys and girls that are here, as you're watching this, as anything comes up, we'll have runners during the panel where you can actually ask your questions. A couple other things, we have a nice X over here because we're filming all of this, we're putting it out into Zoom. So if you need to leave early or you need to go to the bathroom, just make sure to exit off of the sides so that you're not blocking the entire camera. A couple other things, we're here to really kind of give back to the crypto community. We've all had exits. Everyone on the founding team of Nillion has done something before. And we've always found that coming and doing these grassroots things and coming to the universities is really kind of where the energy is at, right? And so as part of that also, after this, we are doing a small bar tab at the beer garden. And so you can come meet with us face to face and talk to the team. We'll show you guys, the blue hoodies are basically the team. And as part of this too, it's a bit of a recruiting trip as well. We're looking to maybe bring on 1 to 2 just really sharp, passionate people about crypto. And so we can obviously share more about Nillion with you guys after this too. So I'm gonna kick this thing off formally. I wanna bring out David from Columbia, and he's gonna talk about Andrew, kick this thing off, and then we'll get Andrew up here, and then we'll kick off the panel. Okay, guys, thank you.
Yeah, my name is David Alderman. I am a second-year student at Columbia Business School, and been privileged to come up here and ask these guys some questions. So Andrew is going to come up to the stage, and I'll give a little intro about him. So he started Hedera Hashgraph, which is like about a top 30 cryptocurrency, and is used in enterprise-grade public network. He's also a co-founder of NFT.com, which is a decentralized NFT platform, and he's also a founding CMO for Reserve Protocol, which is the first algorithmic stablecoin, which is widely used in hyperinflation-related areas like Venezuela. And then, if that's not enough, outside of crypto, he was also co-founder of Pet Lab, which is the fastest growing pet supplement company in the US. So any pet lovers out there. Co-founder of Altitude Ads, and he also runs a large online biohacking community called biohackinggroup.com. And then with that, we can have Andrew come to the stage, and he's going to give us his view of how to build a crypto unicorn. So Andrew.
All right, hello everyone. Firstly, thank you to Columbia University for having us. Thank you for everyone here for showing up, and thank you for BetaWorks for hosting us when Columbia couldn't because of the COVID restrictions. I'm going to start this talk. Well, have you ever wondered how these crypto projects, these unicorns, just seem to appear out of nowhere? You know, whether it's Terra Luna or Solana, etc., etc. I'm going to give you a kind of inside look into how these things are created. And I'm going to do so by first starting off with a bit of a story about myself so that I can show you both my path and the things I did right and the things I did wrong and my learnings and the things I'm going to do differently in future. So I started off as a law student at the University of Sydney, then became a lawyer in London. My first wave, and waves is a constant theme I'll be referring back to, was actually in internet marketing. I started a company called Altitude Ads, and then which spawned several direct-to-consumer businesses, which is what PetLab was, and Sell, a couple of other businesses that have done hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And then the second way, I retired in 2015, went to music school, lived in a student dorm, and then in 2017, I started Hedera Hashgraph. I caught the blockchain wave. And then 2019, I was the founding CMO of the Reserve Protocol, and now I've started Nillion and NFT.com. So what are the commonalities behind this journey that I've had, right? And there are these two icons down the bottom here. One is, I'm not a surfer actually. I can surf, but I'm not a surfer. It's my ability to kind of see waves and to be enchanted by waves. And waves is something that I'll explore in this talk. And the second, that Nakamoto Pepe there, is an attention to detail and an obsession with things which are kind of contrarian, but make a lot of sense. Okay, and we'll go through that in the course of this talk. So what are the ingredients to a crypto unicorn? I've come up with 6 potential ingredients, but there are possibly far more, right? Here they are. The first is timing a wave. The second is a phenomenal team. The third is the idea. And then you have things like community, rewarding token economics, and then lastly, connected and multidimensional thinking. And we'll go through this in this talk. But as I was coming up with this talk, I was like, I wonder which one of these is the most important, right? I think that I thought initially it might be team, but then as I thought more and more about this, it occurred to me that I would rather be a poor team, an average team in a phenomenal wave than a really excellent team in a terrible wave or a non-growing industry, right? Because in an industry, the tide lifts all boats. And so blockchain and cryptocurrencies have several waves and several sub-waves going through them. And I feel like timing a wave is the most important part, which is why I've been able to create these, in inverted commas, crypto unicorns so quickly. Because not only have I caught an industry in the right wave, but sub-waves of that industry. And like I said, we will go through that in a second. Now, a phenomenal team is a very close second, because if you have a phenomenal team, they will often pivot to the right idea, or they can create themselves the waves. And then the third most important is the disruptive idea. Now, you can have a phenomenal team starting with a poor idea, and they will eventually figure out how to achieve a great idea. And there are multiple examples of that, which again we'll go through. And then everything else we will also cover in this conversation. It's all bound together by hard work, and that's something I'll come to in my conclusion. So the first thing I want to talk about is timing a wave, because I did say that is the most important part of creating a crypto unicorn, right? How do you time a wave? And let's talk about my waves, the waves that I've taken. Okay, so if you look on the left, these are the no wave areas. I was a lawyer. I went to banking for a year after I graduated, and then I started an online shoe store. Now, it's not like you can't make money off waves. In fact, off no waves or off small waves. You can. I made great money being a lawyer and being a banker and selling shoes, but you gotta think about the probability of you actually making a lot of money is just not as high as what happened on the right, whether it's with NFTs, NFT.com, or by just buying my NFT collection, crypto, internet marketing, which was the first wave, and I did catch the legalization of cannabis wave in 2016. I didn't start a company there, but I did invest in a lot of stocks very early. So really, the important thing is to sort of understand what the wave is and how to take advantage of it. And the next thing I want to talk about is sort of how to take advantage of it. Firstly, what is the wave? Secondly, how to take advantage of it. And that's really, it comes down to the idea that you're going to capitalize on in that wave. So I call this wading, right? I've named this slide wading, finding the wave and the right idea. So let's say I've got a wave, it's blockchain, or it's cannabis, or it's or it's internet marketing at the time. How do I find the right idea within that wave? Well, I've written this from left to right because I feel like you can go to expert opinions and industry connections, right? And do as much research as you can, but often the consensus opinion on what the opportunities are the ones which give you the more average results as well. That's what I found. The second, or else, why wouldn't those experts be doing it themselves, right? Or those people who are on Twitter. It's the man in the arena which I care about the most, and the person who's actually creating that unicorn. The second thing is imagining a better future. Now, the problem with imagining a better future is that I can imagine a better future for widgets, but I'm not obsessed with widgets. I don't breathe it day to day, right? And that's the same problem with conceptualizing business models. A lot of my friends, a lot of my younger friends, they all think, oh, this is a great business idea. This is a great business idea. Why doesn't this happen? Yes, the why doesn't this happen is important, but the obsession, which is number 4, which is, I think, the most important thing, the deep market experience and the obsession. You don't have to have had industry experience, but you've got to be obsessed with the idea, right? You've got to be obsessed. I was totally obsessed with blockchain before in 2017. Here's how obsessed I was. In 2017, I went to Founders Fund, Ribbit Capital, a whole bunch of Silicon Valley VCs, and I said, hey, support me with Hedera Hashgraph. They all said no. Every single one of them said no. I had to put I could get the first $500,000 from my brother, all right, and then put it into the company. And the reason that they said no was because they didn't understand it as well as I did. I just was so obsessed. I knew that this thing, which was an alternative consensus mechanism, was gonna, it could change the world. It had a narrative to do so, right? But why was I so confident? Because I was literally obsessed, right? So you can conceptualize business models, you can imagine a better future, but unless you have obsession, it's just not super relevant, okay? Now, there are some founding teams that start and then become obsessed, and that can work as well. But either way, it forms a very, very important part. And so I've instilled within the culture of the companies that I've started that same sort of obsession. Some of my founding team are here, and they actually wrote a slide after this which says obsession. You'll see it. A final point, and I really like this one, is a contrarian narrative. And the reason I like this one is because if you take something that's too obvious, then oftentimes you get more average results, right? And that's why, in 2008, we had a contrarian narrative of internet money with Bitcoin. In 2017, the contrarian narrative was a non-blockchain way of achieving scalability, right? Which is what, blockchain just came out. What are you talking about? A non-blockchain way? What does that even mean? The third contrarian narrative for reserve was a stable cryptocurrency. I mean, cryptocurrency was just going up, down, everywhere, and someone says a stable cryptocurrency. Well, why would you want that, right? There is your contrarian narrative. In a contrarian narrative, there's always the consensus view and the contrarian view, and you want that contrarian view, right? And the fourth is in Nillion. Now, why am I excited about Nillion? Why do I think it's because there are four potential contrarian narratives. The first is decentralized computation that doesn't even, it's not designed to form an immutable ledger. It's just simply designed to do verifiable computations. The second is storing all of your secrets. This is one of my favorites. Storing all of your secrets in plain sight for everyone to see in a mathematically secure way. Right? It's literally not even encrypted. It's just information theoretically secure. It's just you can't hack it with an unlimited amount of computing power. Right? That seems really weird. Imagine having your passwords, your photos, etc., where everyone can see them in a transformed format. It's strange. It's a strange narrative, right? And that's kind of why I like it. Another narrative is consensus without communication. Right? Like, how do you achieve consensus on a computation without any communication? That's a really strange one, right? So these contrarian narratives are things that I go for when I search for things to back or to start. Interestingly, when I can't find a contrarian narrative, what I do is wade. All right, and that's why in one of the last slides it was wading. So as you're surfing to catch a wave, you're working really hard, right? Today was literally a back-to-back day, and the people who are closest to me know that when I'm swimming and I'm working, it's a very, very intense environment. But when I'm not, I'm literally wading, just waiting for a wave. I don't really chase. I become kind of a subject matter expert on things, but I don't necessarily. Basically, what I'm saying is I'm waiting for the next wave and the next contrarian narrative because it's going to be worth my time to execute. Okay, so back to the ingredients for a crypto unicorn. Phenomenal team. I have had the pleasure of knowing several entrepreneurs. An example that comes to mind right now is the founders of Alchemy, who struggled for several years before overnight achieving $1 billion valuation, right? Or even my co-founders in Nillion, Miguel and Rob. I met them in 2017. They came to me with a variation of zero-knowledge proofs, right, which would have made zero-knowledge proofs faster. Was it interesting? Was it contrarian? No, not really, right? Like, it would have made Zcash faster or Monero faster. I'm like, that's worth something, but it's not going to create a, in inverted commas, overnight crypto unicorn. Doesn't have that edge to it, right? So pushed back on them. 2019, they came back to me. They said, hey, we've got this way of doing GDPR compliant identity databases. I'm like, oh, what's that? So then I went into it, took a look at it, realize that you can't approach identity in a decentralized way as a frontal motive. You have to go via providing value to people and then having those identities onboarded into whether it's a centralized or a decentralized network. No one actually cares, right? But so I was like, I pushed back on that to them as well. And then in 2021, they said, hey, we've got this way of using nodes which doesn't do a blockchain. It just gives you verifiable computations very efficiently. And it's got these really weird properties of no encryption use, but mathematically provably, unhackable. I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. Let me take a look at this. My point is, though, that team eventually figured out how to make things work, but it took time, right? And that's the problem with having a team without the wave, right? It sort of takes time, the right idea that, so the key elements of a founding team: entrepreneurial hustle and skill, crypto nativeness, raw intelligence, and the right mix of people. If you don't have entrepreneurial skill and hustle, what happens is you create companies that are just not as competitive as they should be. They're not top 1 to 3. They're kind of somewhere down the line, right? It's funny because I have several companies in mind, but I don't want to mention them right now because they're all friends of mine. But this is what happens when you don't have entrepreneurial skill and hustle. If you lack crypto nativeness, i.e., being a crypto degen or having that experience, then what happens is you lack exact product market fit. Right, so you create products where that crypto people just don't use as much as they could. Raw intelligence. If you don't have raw intelligence, what happens? I know a lot of teams who have a lot of energy and not that sort of raw analytical intelligence. And what you have is this situation where you get a lot of wheels turning. And there's a lot of activity, but the results just don't reflect the amount of effort being put in, right? Man, I feel so bad for people that have that, and I just wish sometimes I think about them and I was like, I wish there was a co-founder who just had that raw intelligence alongside a co-founder who just had that rah-rah, right? Like and so this isn't all in one person. This is in a team, right? This is what you want, and you want it so that the different members of the team can balance each other out. Whereas, if you give too much power to the person who has a raw intelligence but is not crypto native, man, you're in deep trouble. Right? They're going to focus on the wrong things completely. I've been in so many of these situations where the balance is different, and that's what brings me to the good mix of skills and capabilities. I've had teams that are extremely technical and can't market, and you get these great products and no one knows about them, right? I regularly have VCs hitting me up and being like, man, this team is so good. Look what they've built, this multi-chain DEX, it's like amazing, but no one knows about them, right? And that happens all the time. Or in vice versa, right, where we've got these teams with great marketing and then the delivery is like, meh, whatever, So what you want is a mix of all of these, I find, as well as something that is very undervalued, which is really good synergy. And I find that people who have been friends before is very good. People who have worked together in a professional capacity before is even better. And people who have built companies before is like the main thing. But oftentimes I mean, NFT.com is a little bit different because the founding team for Hedera Hashgraph came together, but the other founding team members, Alex and Ryan, and Paul, if you're watching this, I'm calling you guys out, were a part of my founding team for Hedera, and I asked them to come aboard for Nillion, and they said, made too much money and I'm enjoying myself on the beach now, but if you really want me to, I'll do it just because I'm loyal, but I don't think I want to go into the firefight again, right? And so, but that synergy, if they came on board with me, it'd just be like, click, 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 things would work. And so that synergy is extremely important because it just lets you get things done very quickly. Okay, evangelizing the community. Now, I know probably a lot of people who are watching this want to know how I've built these communities. And honestly, this is the question I get asked the most. Naval has said on one of his podcasts that a good marketer is one in a million, and a good community builder could be once in a generation, or something along those lines. And it's true. I literally can't tell you how much I get hit up with projects asking me this. So I'm so glad that now I can say, hey, watch this YouTube video, and instead of me getting on a phone call with you. So let's go into this in a little bit more depth than some of the others. Right? Firstly, I want to say that building a community isn't a one-size-fits-all. The strategies constantly change, especially when you're trying to deal with achieving exponentials in terms of community growth. And the solution isn't the same for every single project. So some people are like, dude, I'm taking your playbook. I'm like, dude, it's a different project. You can't take my playbook, right? You have to think in terms of first principles. Even in the same niche, so the Bored Apes relative to the Mechaverse project, right? Both had great art, right? The Mechaverse project had a phenomenal run-up with great, Discord flows and good community support during its rise up. Whereas the Bored Apes built community via the right supporters. So Guy Oseary ended up coming on board, I think the team, or being somehow incentivized by the team, my understanding, and brought on a bunch of celebrities, and those people sort of championed the Bored Apes community, right? Alongside several other initiatives. Which brings me to a very important point, which is what I like to do with community is two main principles. The first is stack probabilities, i.e., Guy Oseary might not have hit, but maybe something else would, but maybe something else would, maybe something else would. These initiatives, and I'll go through the initiatives after this, or some of the initiatives. And the second is go for the exponential, right? You can do incremental stuff. You got to do the basics, right? But I want to get on. So an example of going for an exponential is with Hedera. We obviously had some of the crypto people interested, but what we did, which was kind of parallel to crypto, was go for the gold community. Who would have thought about that? Going for the gold community when you're going after the crypto community through Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money, right? And that absolutely blew up the community. My point is that the thinking that I was applying was go for the exponential. And a massive, massive mistake I find is to outsource your initial bootstrap marketing to an agency or someone who has a formulaic way of doing so, right? Because they're never going to go for the exponential. Marketing for a massive company and community building for a massive company is far, far different to marketing for a marketing and community building for a startup. You can take risks that they can't take. You don't have to worry about brand. A mentor of mine, one of my early mentors, said, "Brand is bullshit below 100 million in revenue." Right? I kind of agree with him. I don't think it's completely bullshit because, but I do agree with the sentiment that he had. So let's get into the nitty gritty, so that no one calls me and asks me how to build a community. Right? Here are some of my best practices and strategies. Okay, and then I'll go after this into saying that this isn't the be all end all. Okay, this is some things I do. The right support, as an example of that, is the Bored Apes with getting those celebrities on board. I think the Doodles had this as well, and they had really great influencers. You have a sort of overground approach of there are companies out there that get BitCloud had like Sequoia and Andreessen and all these people. So anyway, the right supporters can help build a community, right? But they're not the be all end all. This is in no way in any sort of order of importance. Heroes and characters. What Sam Bankman-Fried was to Solana, what Brock Pierce was to EOS, right? It's very, very hard to manufacture this because it takes someone who has a very good reputation, an audience that would be receptive to the idea, and they're going to be passionate about it. You can give them X% of tokens, it doesn't matter. They don't care, they're going to take those tokens and nothing's going to happen. They have to be on it, they have to consider it theirs, and and that's where the personal relationships tend to make a very big difference, right? Or just specific moments in time where something like that is possible, I think Brock knew Dan Larimer, the founder of Solana, knew Sam Bankman-Fried, and that was even part of the multi-coin thesis in investing in Solana, that relationship existed, right? So these are examples of, story and common purpose. So the story that I utilized for Hedera, and which popped it off. I mean, I tried everything. I tried non-blockchain. It was a directed cyclic graph. I tried gossip about gossip, which is the way that the protocol works. And the one that really hit, the story that hit with both the community and and which created a PR, was blockchain is dead. The future is Hashgraph. I had no idea that was gonna take off, but it in fact did. But my point is that the testing that I did on the story and the testing that I did on how people would react to the story was very important. It was that common purpose that united the Hedera community in the beginning is a very evangelizing part of building a community, and a very important part of building a community. And we've got engaging, rewarding early members. We did that in Hedera. With Nillion, we are literally approaching everyone who joins the Telegram within, I think it was the first 1,000, I'm not sure where we are at right now, but my directive was 1, you approach them, 2, you thank them, 3, you find out where they were from, 4, you offer them something, and 5, you find out if they have any value add for the project or if they would like to contribute in some way. You engage them, right? The fifth is the fifth is token price management. Was anyone here in the ICP initial sale who bought at like, I don't know, $400 billion valuation and watched the price crash? This is not what you want to do with a community, right? What you want to do is have a situation like Ethereum, where I bought it at $20, other people, and you sort of ride this wave up. What it does is the antithesis of pissing a community off, which is what ICP did, right? What it does instead is it engenders loyalty to the protocol. The reason why I had such difficulty in promoting Hedera was because the Ethereum nuts were just like protecting it because they had so much economic interest in it, because they followed it for so much of the time, because they had bought into the story and the common purpose of Ethereum, right? And Hedera was a threat to that. I only realized how much of an advantage and moat that was when I tried to attack it, right? Which is also why I positioned Nillion as not a layer 1. It is a meta infrastructure that assists layer 1. I would not want to go up against those incumbents again, having done it once, right? And then engagement programs. I actually really like what Helium has done here with their token economics and how they engage their community to put up 2G towers in different places. If you want to see great community engagement and token economics, you should check out the Helium project. It's pretty impressive. Okay, remember there's no rules. So these are other strategies, right? And I'll give you examples of each of these. So, with Twitter strategies, Chainlink had a sick Twitter community in the beginning. Olympus DAO with the 3.3, and Wonderland as well with the Frog, right? All across Twitter, you probably saw it. Airdrops, wireless. Okay, so what I will say, and this will all be online, so you can take this. These are all worth executing on, okay? The difference is that you want to, if you can, execute them with just a little bit of difference. So an example would be, imagine doing an airdrop where you had, in order to collect the tokens, you had to do something like verifiably post on Twitter, or invite a friend, or do something along those lines, so that what you're actually doing is creating distribution via the token airdrop. It's a pretty good idea, actually. I might have to do that for NFT. Another example is mining strategies, right? Another variation of mining strategies could be, creating a situation where you embed within the mining protocol a way to encourage customer acquisition. So, actually we're about to do that with Nillion ring mining, and so I won't say any more about that. Or with the top-down investor strategy with BitCloud, for example. Imagine if you had all these investors that wanted to invest. Well, you want to invest, then write a public statement saying that you will protect token price below this floor, right? Like if it goes below this floor, you believe it's undervalued, so you will buy it. That statement in itself leverages this, so that you leverage the community, the confidence you have in the community, etc., etc. My point is that what you're actually doing is not just doing these, you're playing for the exponential, which is what we had discussed before. Hope that was useful. Rewarding token economics. Now this is a hard one to talk about because, if I'm talking about RSR, then it's token economics with regards to an insurance, how the token helps to insure, the stablecoin protocol, or token economics of Helium encourage the creation of 2G networks. It's so specific to different protocols what I can tell you is that what you probably want is a 2 to 3 year analyst who's a crypto degen and or a computer scientist or a physician who's good at math, and then for them good at math and a crypto degen, for them to be able to come in and analyze that and see what's best practice, because things are always evolving, and then execute on token economics. What I will say though is that I do believe that token economics are the new massive customer acquisition opportunity. In 2008 or 9, I caught the newsfeed algorithm where it created a huge amount of customer acquisition and wealth for myself. In 2011, when Marissa Mayer brought stream ads into Yahoo, I managed to catch that wave and again create a ton of customer acquisition. So I have a sense of waves that can create customer acquisition. I think token economics is one of those waves, and I think we're going to prove it out with Nillion. So keep in contact with that project and see what we actually end up doing. I mean, it's so obvious when you look at the Helium protocol. Look at those networks; they're like literally all over the world, from tokens that were worthless before this project came up, in a system that encourages you to put a very intrusive piece of device into your house, where you have to buy it, right? In hope that you actually get tokens for usage in this network. For someone to do that for tokens shows you that what it is a way to motivate people to do stuff, and thus being able to motivate to use it as a token economics, basically. Okay, I better move on because we have to have the panel up here as well. So final parts of this, my biggest mistake. When I look at Hedera and I look at Reserve and I look at the things that I've done, Hedera has a fully diluted market cap, 12 bill, and Reserve have maybe 3-4 bill, something like that, depending on the day in crypto. But I still think I made mistakes. And the biggest mistake that I made was I was so enamored by the technology, I was so enamored by the team, I was so enamored by the idea that I didn't focus on the development of the ecosystem. And that is why I think I did a top 30, not a top 10. Right? So not having a user and application focus from day one is where I think that I made the biggest mistake. Right? I mean, look, it's a top 30 cryptocurrency, the top 100 cryptocurrency. I don't think, when I say mistake, it's what we're going to make sure we don't do in Nillion. And so what are we doing on Nillion? Firstly, we're obsessed with the ecosystem. The tech is as cool as Hedera was, if not cooler. The team is phenomenal. The idea is great, but I'm literally focused on the ecosystem. How? Firstly, founding entrepreneur program, where we are bringing on and a large portion of the founding team is incentivized via tokens, not on what happens with the protocol and the development of the protocol, but on the development of companies that are built off the protocol. That's how you create a top 10. Second is a phased approach to development, and thus utility use cases. So what is the thing we can bring to market immediately? So from an engineering perspective, if you read our white paper and understand the technology, the first thing we're likely to have to build is some form of authentication, which via the blockchain happens in terms of private keys. You put your private key in, therefore you authenticate to the network. But in our case, could be anything from your biometrics to, yes, a private key, to your identity, etc., right? So that allows us to launch specific use cases early. I don't know, decentralized KYC, decentralized LastPass, decentralized Fireblocks, etc. But we don't necessarily have to go to the compute functions immediately, i.e., cross-chain dexes, or complex data sharing and processing, etc. Right? These are not things that we have to do immediately. So we're going to phase the approach out, and then integrated token economics. As I said, token economics can incentivize all sorts of stuff. So we're going to make sure that the token economics incentivizes the ecosystem. All right, final point. luck and probabilities make a big difference. Unfortunately, that's the case. But there is something that I've always done in all my companies, which I call stacking probabilities. Okay, and this doesn't always work, as probabilities express themselves. But for example, in Nillion, what we've done is we've got a crypto native team with we've got a bunch of unicorn veterans, founders of companies that have started unicorns before. We've got a fresh defensible technology. We're moving in a kind of wide space. This is the culture of obsession. This is the slide that my team wrote. And then an evangelizing story, i.e. the inventor of this protocol invented some of the algorithms by which information flows through fiber optic cables. So he helps power the internet, basically. Great story, right? So all these things are designed to stack probabilities. And what does that actually do? Well, what is the outcome of stacking probabilities? We haven't made one capital we haven't requested one capital introduction, and the top names in Silicon Valley have come to us, often through there's no website even. You go to nillion.com, it's like a email collect, right? They've come to us and they've said, literally to our catch-all email, like info@nillion.com or something, and they've said, hey, really heard about you, somehow got a hold of your white paper, lots of people talking about you, is there potential to invest, or can we talk to you guys, right? What is that? That's the stacking of probabilities, and that's just one example of how it occurs. But then you get things like developers building on your network, you get people hearing about it, can make a very big difference, etc. So I think taking right action, stacking those probabilities, everything I just mentioned in building a crypto unicorn is like a small cut. You keep making these cuts, and eventually you kill an elephant, which will create a unicorn. Final point: hard work and multidimensional thinking. I will say that my journey through this has not been without struggle. And for anyone thinking of creating, a crypto unicorn, it sounds good, but you are the referee of your own life. So I would say that you have to weigh up whether the hard work is actually worth it, and whether you want to give up that agency in life to be able to do something like this. The trade-off is becoming less and less attractive to me, unless I kind of reframe it as, hey, I'm kind of changing the world. But that's a reframe. I know I'm reframing myself, right? You have to kind of decide if that hard work is worth it to you. And the final thing I'll say is on the point of connected and multidimensional thinking. Not a phenomenal team, not timing wave, not rewarding tokening, not evangelizing community, or not disrupting tech. All of these things, plus potentially several other factors. I'm only one person who has done this twice, maybe 3 times now, right? Not one of them, but all of them make a difference. So I would encourage you to think multidimensionally, both in terms of the things, the elements that you look for as you start these businesses, but also in terms of the effect that it's going to have in your life, which hopefully is a positive one. That's it. Thanks, guys.
I guess we're going to go ahead and start the panel. And I guess Andrew has a really good interesting presentation. We're going to ask him some questions related to that and how to build a crypto unicorn. But joining him on stage is going to be Alex Page. Alex Page is the CEO of Nillion. He is an entrepreneur. Alex is an entrepreneur turned crypto degen turned crypto builder, and he helped build the BitClout community, which is something Andrew mentioned earlier, and he also launched a crypto chat application called MetaLink. And then prior to that, he was a he was early career. He was in investment banking, working at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. So we will welcome Andrew and Alex to the stage. I think one thing, I guess, that I really noticed in the presentation is you talk about waves, and so I think catching a wave, particularly related to all your different things that you've done. So I guess my question is, like, where do you start to look for what waves to catch, and like which ones you think will be big in the future?
Great question. Honestly, I tend to look where the freaks and ghouls are. So the people who are misunderstood. I got friends who are just really misunderstood, and they're kind of weird, but they're very smart, right? And the things that they're interested in, the things that they're doing on the weekend, those are the places that I tend to look. I don't know if they're going to be good. I don't know. Like, I was in the first, I bid the most for an NFT in the first ever NFT auction, and people thought I was insane, right? And that NFT, I won it for like $20,000 or something, and it's worth like $500,000 now, right? So I think that, and there were so many weird people there, So I think that it's twofold. One, looking at weird people and having a sense for it. And I think growing up in Australia in a place where I honestly never felt like I fit in, it gave me the opportunity to think, to have to trust my thinking as opposed to what the consensus view was. Right? Because the consensus view didn't work for me. It made me vastly unhappy. So there isn't a forum or a way to do it. It's just getting a sense for the things which are happening, which sound a little weird, but might be true. When I heard with Nillion storing your secrets in plain sight, I was like, that's the craziest thing I've heard. But let me look into this a little more. And then understanding mathematical information theoretics made a lot of difference.
Do you think it really pays to be intellectually curious?
Yeah. So I think that when you find the way that you come across these people is by being intellectually curious. Yeah. But intellectual curiosity is a funny thing because you can be intellectually curious about a lot of things. I'm intellectually curious about like the 1940s war with Germany, right? But I think that it's intellectual curiosity in things which could change the future, or things which look different, which create a different future. Remember I said in my talk, building a better future? It's things that you're like, oh, that's just not the way it's done now, right? It's a certain type of intellectual curiosity, I would say.
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's a lot of weird people if you go to crypto conferences. I find a lot of those around.
Yeah, I'll be right there.
Welcome to the stage. I guess on a different note, so you have an idea of like how you want to build a crypto unicorn, but what do you think the risks are associated with building that unicorn that's going to like impede on your ability to succeed?
Okay. The risks. Well, every single part of the 6 steps that I said, the 6 elements, is going to be a risk. So I might not be able to get the right team. In the beginning, it was difficult to find the right angle in the story. Maybe I caught the wrong wave. Right? These are all things which I think about. So in the beginning, I think you have sort of concept risk. And then as you start proving out that concept, you begin to have execution risk, right? So, but that execution risk minimizes. I feel like the execution risk minimizes with great people, and the concept risk minimizes as you get people who understand the industry more and more and can help you build product, right? So I think those two are the major risk. Obviously, there's like, you know, acts of God which could happen, but you know, I think that in terms of a protocol, those two, our protocol, those two are the risk that we consider.
I mean, I think when we started out with Nillion, it was originally this risk in the technology, right? We went and had this conversation with Miguel, and we sat down with them for 3 days in Brussels and literally just peppered them with questions the entire time, trying to learn as much about the technology as we could. And we walked out and we were absolutely blown away by what he had created, but you know, it is just one guy talking about a bunch of math that we don't understand. And so in the beginning, it was really, you know, when we did our talk at Cambridge University, I was like, if anybody can make Miguel go, I haven't thought about that, I'll pay him $500,000. Like, because I want to know that now instead of when I raise a bunch of money from VCs or put this thing out into the public. And so it started with that, and we've gotten verification. We were working with Royal Holloway and had a really amazing professor there who's been embedded in Nillion and helping us with the mathematics. But now, you know, as Andrew said, we're moving from that point of, is it the technology that's at risk versus the execution of it? Are we executing properly? Are we moving in the right direction? Do we have the engineering team in the right place and they're focused on the right things? Is there anything that we're missing in terms of how we're building? And then, you know, from there we get on to the normal market risks I think any company really faces. Are we building a strong community? Are we communicating with them properly? We'll move on from, you know, those initial engineering questions into, are we achieving product market fit with what we're building?
Yeah.
And those are all the big questions that
And
you need to
there's always like some engineering risk as well, but we've literally got an engineering rock star which we can't announce right now. When we do announce it, we'll make headlines, but we can't announce it. Who is going to build the protocol? He looked at the math and he was so excited about what it could become. You know, the professor from Royal Holloway who did due diligence and maths for us ended up joining our team because she was like, this is incredible. This is a really interesting piece of mathematics. But translating that math to actual engineering is the current edge for us. So once we get past that, you know, these things there's always risks in business, but you know, we approach the next risk, which is, you know, then creating product and then et cetera, you know.
Right, I guess everything kind of has to come together, which is kind of what your diagram is supposed to represent, right? Yeah. So I guess a little bit of a different topic. What about the future of crypto? And I guess maybe a hint of your view is what Nillion is doing. But over the next year or two, because crypto moves so fast, you can't really talk in 10 years. But where do you see the space going?
So I see with the evolution of distributed computation, whether it be via Nillion or, you know, and decentralized immutable storage, you know, I see more and more industries being affected. So, you know, right now we've got sort of the beginning of art being affected by NFTs. I think supply chain, lending, identity verification, security, big data, you know, decentralized computation in and of itself has several implications for companies sharing data, for example, right? There are just sort of a realm of potential futures. I don't know which one's going to hit. When in 2017, I had no idea that. I knew NFTs was going to be big, just like I know that identities will one day get on the blockchain or be decentralized, maybe in Nillion, not a blockchain. Who knows? Just like I know that certain supply chains, you know, belong online. I think there's a company already doing that, which is anyway. That's successful, and you know there are things like play to earn gaming. I saw those things earlier. I just didn't know when they would pop, right? So there are these things I mentioned, which I think will become something big. I think that social tokens will become a thing at some point. Don't know when, right? Don't know when a Web3 social network will occur, but I think it is probably going to happen at some point in time.
We had a conversation too when we were coming here from the airport as well about, you were seeing the wave, and you were talking about OpenSea specifically, where sometimes when you're really early to the wave, sometimes it's about creating the best product you can and staying alive long enough to get to that point, right?
Yeah.
You want to expand
Yeah,
on that?
my buddy Devin Finzers, who started OpenSea, I asked him, hey, what was the trick? How'd you do it? He's like, man, I just stayed alive during the winter, and wasn't really a huge trick of any sort. I thought that the industry was cool, and I stayed alive for long enough, and other people died or pivoted. We just kind of, and so. It's not easy to predict these waves. That's why, right? And that's why you got to be kind of obsessed. You have to have some form of belief. But he had that same thing where he believed in it. I believed in Hedera, for example, just like I believe in Nillion, where I know enough about this space. I've seen enough to know that this could become a future which changes everything, or changes a lot, right? Whether it's in this case security or passwords or interoperability or whatever. So.
Yeah, and I guess even if you want identity on the blockchain, I would imagine privacy is going to be a huge factor. Even though today that people they can do if someone knew your MetaMask wallet address, they can see everything that you do. But I can't imagine that being a part of the future.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
I think our relationship with data is going to change a lot as more and more parts of our overall identity as individuals becomes digitized. That idea that you will be able to either control your information or know that the person you are providing that information to isn't using it in a way you don't want them to is going to become a bigger and bigger narrative as we get towards this idea of, like I said, I have no idea when metaverse is going to come, but in the idea that a lot more of your identity is going to be based around the digital parts of your life, we're going to start to care more and more about what data we're giving and how it's being used. You think about an Oculus, for example, right? If the technology to be able to track the things that you are looking at in your Oculus specifically, that's a very specific amount of information that nobody really has yet. But as more and more things are moving towards that area and that digitization and gets closer and closer to you and your identity, I think we're going to care more and more about what happens.
And to your point, privacy is one of those sleepers. I remember during my presentation, I said there were 4 narratives. One is actually privacy, and I feel like making a private blockchain, giving a public blockchain private functionality. It's actually a nice contrarian narrative, which empowers something like identity or other potential financial applications. To be honest, maybe even a decentralized KYC of some sort, for example, right? And that's also one of the reasons Nillion was so interesting to me, because you don't just have privacy, you have information theoretic secure privacy. You have privacy without encryption. You have privacy where there isn't a shred of your identity left on the network unless you bring it back together, basically. It's almost like Horcruxing your privacy and then bringing it back together. And what this creates is a GDPR compliant way to store anything to get privacy or data or identity, on a decentralized network, and being able to kind of bring it back when you want to, but no one else being mathematically possible, being basically mathematically impossible for anyone else to do it.
Yeah, privacy without encryption. I gotta wrap my head around that one for a second.
That's one of those contrarian narratives. I was like, I'm gonna have to give me a second on this one.
Yeah.
But as you go into, with the same thing with Bitcoin, right? Internet money. Like, hang on, give me a sec. How does that work? Why don't you just print the money? It's just like World of Warcraft cash. This is the same sort of thing. But I love that, right? Where you're like, oh wait, that just got me for a second, right? That's why I was like, man, I gotta do this Nillion thing. This is cool.
Yeah, no, it's really cool, because especially when you think about where your private keys go, or just generally your passwords, and how that's where you store that. Because I have a lot of friends that they don't want to lose their private keys, and so they put them on the Google Drive, and that doesn't make sense. You're not going to lose it, but someone can find it.
It's pretty crazy that you think about it. Most people store their private keys in a centralized way, for access to a decentralized network. It's kind of crazy. What you have, a lot of the the VCs store their private keys on this thing called Fireblocks, right, which is a sort of permission network, it's still permission. That's why what we are, one of the initial use cases could be a decentralized Fireblocks, which stores not your private key. Your private key is never formulated. It just allows you to recreate a signed transaction and then put it onto a blockchain. And so a decentralized network will never reveal your private key. It will just do the computation necessary to create a signed transaction to be able to put it onto multiple blockchains. It's also a weird concept, right? So, but very interesting one. This is another potentiality of Nillion.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I guess another question I would have is I would imagine in the room there's a lot of beginner crypto people that are trying to figure everything out. They're trying to even answer the question of like what is the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum. So like what advice would y'all have for that type of person?
Be a DJ. Go in, lose some money, participate in NFT drops. That's how I trained. Alex and I got Alex into Bitcoin and Ethereum in 2017, and it's just buying, losing money. The guy Andrew who presented cannot lose money on Ethereum, but he learned a lot from it, and he gets frazzled, that guy. But my point is that experience. It teaches you, when you're putting money into a yield farm or of some sort to get yield, or you're experiencing permanent loss. These are things that as you're playing with small amounts of money, they teach you what blockchain is all about. So I would say that just mini ape into NFT projects, scams, Ponzi schemes. Just don't lose, put $10 in, right? Like, see what happens.
We're trying to figure out if it's a Ponzi or
Try and figure it out if it's a Ponzi. Yeah.
I'm not going to invest in a Ponzi if I know it's a Ponzi.
No. But sometimes I'm like, I'm not sure if this is a Ponzi or not. Here's a little bit of money. Let's see what happens. Right?
Sometimes it's just the experience of getting there. Like with the, in 2017, it was just figuring out how to participate in an ICO, initial coin offering, right? The process you had to go through and sending, Ethereum to wallets and what you get back and how the math is done. Like those early things that I did were a huge help just because now I understood how the blockchain worked. I understand how these processes work. When it was the IDO craze, going into these things
initial DEX offering.
Yeah, the initial DEX offerings like Duckstarter and BSE Pad and all these things, and figuring out how to get funds there and then do the thing at the right time to do this.
Losing so much money on that as well.
Lost a lot of money on that. We were really aping on that. But it was a great learning experience because you can figure out like the depths and you can see all of how the ecosystem works, and then you're in these Telegram groups and Discords and you're seeing how people are talking.
And then you have an idea of what products the industry needs, or where the holes are, what sort of issues that you come across, etc. It just becomes a whole lot easier. And sometimes you make money. We bought a coin called Kishu.
Oh yeah.
The girl I was seeing at the time. It was like, hey, buy Kishu.
Dog coin.
A dog coin. I mean, it did like 100x and then went down to 0. So that was fun. But that taught us a lot as well. So my point is that this crypto, it made us crypto native. We come from, it's like Bain says, I was born in the dark. Like, it makes you born in the dark, and so that's how we learn.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of hands-on experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just reading the Forbes article, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
And podcasts. There are some really good ones out there as well. Yeah.
I think that's how I started. I started with podcasts, and then decided I needed to experience actually on chain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think now maybe we'll move to questions from the audience.
So you had mentioned Sorry.
Yeah, there's a break.
All right. You had mentioned a transition from really focusing on building out an ecosystem. What are the things that at Nillion you guys are doing to build that out, whether it be through grants or a better interface to Nillion? What are some of the best ways you think protocols or yourself can build out that ecosystem?
So I feel like grants are great, right? But everyone's doing them now, right? But that would be a base level. I feel like with in Nillion, take a perfect class example is Luna, right? They built Anchor and Mirror, but they built it as part of the founding team. It's exactly what I think that you should be doing. You should be encouraging people not to build a protocol, but to build things outside of that protocol. The protocol is only phase one, right? Look, I feel like Nillion in and of itself could get to a top 30 coin just on its technology alone. But if we build the ecosystem, then it will be much greater. But what we've done is, as I said, created that founding entrepreneurs program, or rather thesis. The second thing is really embedded it within our culture to think of it in that way. Externally, we are very, very bullish on the technology. People get very excited about that and everything else I said, but internally we're very focused on making sure that ecosystem gets built right. And then, the token economics. We have some very, very smart kids from kids. I call them kids, but they're adults from who went from the University of Cambridge, who are part of our team that are working on creating incentive structures so that those pricing structures, incentive structures, so that the token itself encourages future use, similar to say what Helium would. Right? And the reason why that's so important, why those initial uses are so important, is because once you have one or two, just like Anchor and Mirror, the value of the network exponentially increases because you have more people onboarding, you have more use of the network. It gets hardened, etc., etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've actually been embedding that in our team since day one. I mean, we have Jonathan here, who is a member of our team and already has an idea that he wants to build on top of Nillion, and we're bringing him on into the team to be alongside us while we're building. So it's not just the engineering team going out and building amazing technology. We've also got somebody who's like going to go out in the market and use this in a real way, alongside helping us decide what product decisions to make. So
he's literally part of the founding team of Nillion. I mean, he's building the protocol, but him and numerous others, including myself, have ideas of things that we want to build off the protocol. Our compensation incentive structures say that if you go and you build an approved project, then you don't stop vesting. You just keep vesting your initial tokens because you're building off the network. And that's in several of the primary founding team contracts, right? This is why I'm saying the culture is one of focusing on ecosystem.
I had a question on maybe like an anecdote in regards to early stages, how you use equity and tokenization to incentivize the members of the internal team. So the team that was really in the trenches, I want to know how many people were in that team, and also like the timelines kind of for something like Hedera, how long it was you guys working in the trenches, at what point did expansion come into the room, equity, how did you delimit, was there a company, was there people investing in tokens, did you do strictly tokens, or I guess just the dichotomy of the tools you had there, because equity really is a tool for your longevity and incentivizing your core team. So maybe a little bit of the thought process, what went into that and what built it to be a strong company.
Yeah. So from day one, we've always seen Nillion as a public utility. The goal here was for a network to exist that had all these capabilities with computation, privacy, and everything, and for there to be no real centralized control in the long run. And so we start off with a structure that doesn't even have equity. We're an association in Switzerland, where it's essentially a nonprofit organization, right? So that's the owner of the protocol, the token, all of those things, and nobody owns it. There are people who have a say in how it's governed, but there are no equity owners, and so equity was never really a part of the equation when it came to compensation for anybody on the team. And so I was always focused on tokens. And for the people who were very early in the team, myself, and back in September, I guess we've been having conversations all the way until September, but that was the first time we really started putting like our nose to the grindstone. The guys that were there early, we were all working because we believed in the technology, and and we wanted to build something new, and we had the resources to be able to not take any compensation with tokens in the future. So token incentivization has always been a core part of how we're compensating people. As we get closer and closer to going out and doing a fundraise, that's going to change. But for the early guys, like, it was the love of the project, and then that future incentive would be out there.
But it depends on the type of project as well. So some projects do have token value and equity value, right? Like Axie Infinity, for example, or the Bored Apes now, right? They do have the same thing. So it depends how you structure it. You have a more specific question, because how you structure a Bored Ape Yacht Club equity and token is different to an NFT.com, is different to a layer one protocol, is different to an infrastructure layer or meta layer that we're building.
I guess more the a little anecdote of how you knew we're in the sweet spot, right? Because with crypto, you raise money and then suddenly you have pounds and pounds of pressure as that price goes up, and then more and more users on our platform at an alarmingly fast rate, right? Like, so maintenance during that growth, like, what was the size of the team? Like, what roles? Because people were working very hard in that initial firehouse, right?
So you want to know what roles
were most important? Like, would have like, if the bomb squad diffuser didn't show up, we would have all exploded, kind of thing.
There wasn't a single bomb squad guy who would have been key, right? You got to kind of, like I said, multi-dimensional thinking, right? So there wasn't one thing that kept that token price up, or that made sure it was more not stepping on minefields, right? And honestly, we did, for Hedera, we did step on a couple of minefields, right? Like, the token price went to 12 cents and went to 1 cent. That was bad, right? And then it went to 35 cents. Now it's at 20 cents, right? But my point is that was a very, I would have preferred not to have that. I mean, it's crypto, so what are you going to do, right? But it's a lot of things all at once, right? And that's why I say you kind of have to think multidimensionally. You have to think. That's the important thing. So, what we're doing with Nillion is, putting in measures that allow us not to have that sort of token spike. Putting in, and there are things which I probably shouldn't talk about right now, with proprietary things, where we will hopefully support a price level and do it sustainably going into the future. So, engineering updates help the token price. Talks with family offices help the token price. The story helps the token price. All these things, they come together. It's not just one thing. It's, like I said, the totality that supports the strategy of maintaining a token price so that it doesn't do, the ICP example is like, man, it went all the way up. It launched at the top 10 and you got completely decimated if you supported them, right? And it really hurt the community. And that's really an example of something that you want to avoid. That's the worst type of venture capital right there, right? You dump on people. That's why when we talk about potentially doing a round, we haven't raised money yet, but we want to make sure that it's not overwhelmed by venture capitalists and that's the thing.
The narrative is so huge.
Sorry?
It's the narrative.
Yes.
In this space, it's the narrative.
We took a lot of lessons away from what happened with Definity, but also with Hedera as well, about how we want to structure our fundraising, because as Andrew said, you can really crush a community very quickly by having this massive drop in price. And I actually think ICP came out number 3 and just tanked from there. And it's hard to keep a community interested. It's hard to keep team members really interested. And when you see something in a situation like Hedera where they raised it 12 cents and then ended up at 1 cent when they went public launch, like, a lot of people are looking at especially early team, are looking at their incentive packages and are like, is this going to come back? So we did take a lot of lessons of how we are going to, not only when we raise, how we want to structure that, but also how do we manage not having one of these situations where it could be an ICP where you come out in the top 3 and then it's just this, but then a public launch where you do this and then this also hurts just as bad for community, and we don't want to be one of those projects, because we want people to feel like they're they're a part of it from the early
And
stage.
you can't always avoid that. Sometimes it's just crypto, right?
Yeah.
But you just got to be creative and try to make sure that you put the right things in place.
Yeah, last part, I guess. So per that narrative, you said you tested 3 different narratives. When you were testing them out, how did you test them? Like, what was that? What was the test?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I would tell people and see what their reactions were. Talks like this, I actually had several talks with, and there was one talk which completely blew everything else out of the water, and that was the blockchain is dead one. Talking to people and really seeing what people's reactions were. So we did the same thing with Nillion actually. Like there were several angles that we tested where people were like, no, that's not going to work. No, that's going to work. And it's been like, think about it. Like I've been talking to Miguel since 2017, and then Nillion as a technology we kind of was invented early last year. So it's taken us a year to get to this point where we're like, okay, and it's shaped the technology as well, right? So we have said, hey, this narrative is not going to work. This one's not hitting. We got an email from Multicoin being like, hey, we don't believe you because of this. And we're like, cool, right? They don't believe us because of X, Y, and Z. They're not God. They didn't invest in any of my last 2 unicorns either, right? By the way, I have a lot of respect for Carl. Carl's a great friend of mine, right? And so, but I was like, man, that's great feedback, right? And we changed the white paper. We just were like, okay, let's see how we, and now the narrative's changed because of that feedback. But, and now we're getting hit up by like VCs who are far better than them, who are just like, this is insane, But that iterative process, we were very close to the mark, like, anyway. In 2017 we weren't close, 2019 we weren't close, 2021 very close, and but the tweaking made a big difference. I think we should pass the mic on to someone else.
Yeah. One question. Cool. Go again. Go first.
All right, so you guys, it's a question addressed to you, Andrew, because you'll probably see soon with Nillion. Since you already built Hedera, what have you seen so far that at the beginning? Like what happens once you really become a worldwide product? In this case, that you get adopted at a worldwide scale. What are some of these scalability issues that you might encounter on the way?
You mean Vanilla?
For Hedera, but you guys, you can also address from a Nillion point of view.
Okay, well, look, I haven't been a member of the Hedera team for a while now. I don't think there are many scalability issues. I think the next challenge for Hedera is going to be basically a permissionless node network, right? But my understanding is that the smart contracts which now operate on Hedera actually operate with very reasonably good performance relative to everyone else. So I don't see that there are. I don't know 100% because again I'm not in that space. But I've been so focused on Nillion and NFT.com that I just haven't been able to deploy on Hedera. But for all everything I've heard is that the network performs positively. Sorry, I just am not in that team anymore.
Right.
I can connect you with some members of my family team still there, so happy to connect you to discuss.
All right.
So my question is related to risk. So I guess in terms of macro and micro risks, what keeps you guys up at night pre-launch?
In terms of
So macro risk. I don't know, man. I've lived through several winters, and I think we're kind of winterish now. Maybe Bitcoin will halve again, but I feel like it's a good time to launch. And it doesn't really keep me up at night. If Bitcoin goes, if Bitcoin halves and then halves again, maybe I'd be a little concerned, right? With 25% of value it is currently at, but there's still so much money in this market, and it's just a really good market to be in. So I'm not super concerned macro-wise, and especially because we've done so much work to insulate ourselves. There's so much money that wants to come into our project. Like the micro work is done so well, the macro work is a little bit less relevant now.
I gotta agree with that. I mean, if we're getting close to token launch and we were at the Bitcoin 60,000 range, I would be thinking a lot about the macro risks of, you know, launching a token into a market that has gone up that much. But I feel like from a macro perspective, we're in a pretty good place right now, and we're still, you know, many months away from that. So nothing really keeps me up on the night of the macro
I
scale.
think the thing that doesn't keep me up, I'm so focused on right now, is the war for engineers, right? Like, you know, it's just hard, right? And so, but again, multi-dimensional thinking, right? The collateral that we have, the story that we have, the funders, et cetera, all those people are creating this situation where engineers will eventually want to come and work with us because we have a compelling story, because, you know, it's a cool project, because of the people involved, etc. You know, but that does concern me. And you know, we have a couple of C-level open roles which we just want to fill. You know, specifically a GC right now and COO, but we have very, very strong leads and people. It's just that we want that rockstar team, so we say no to a lot of people, and you know, so that's kind of, yeah.
Anyone else? With Nillion, as you guys are like playing the space, like removing encryption layers, like how do you guys look at kind of scaling your efforts across like different spaces? Like, you know, when you look at identity, you look at you know, enterprises using antiquated kind of security bylaws within their governance. When you look at GDPR or DoD space. So how do you guys kind of see those obstacles from like an exponential thinking factor of getting to scale, or is there, you know, just so much greenfield outside of like this kind of regulated, antiquated thinking around data and governance? Do you guys foresee any issues with that?
I mean, there's definitely real opportunity in those spaces for what Nillion can provide, especially when it comes to security, storage of information, the privacy factor. And you know, the thing about the more regulated industries is that they're a lot harder to move, and they don't want to be early. And so it's hard to focus on them in a beginning period like this, which is kind of why there are real opportunities with some of the smaller, more innovative players, but on the like larger, more regulated industries, bylaws, or you know, the defense sector, they're not going to move quickly on anything. They want something that's been hardened. They want something that's been tested. It needs to be around for a long time before they do get involved. You know, if we were going to enter into that segment, which would be like a much later point in the whole process, it would be, you know, through a founding entrepreneur would be the way to do it. To take somebody who, you know, believes in the technology that we've brought in, that has been a part of the team at some point, that has a really great knowledge and ability to go to the specific industry and create a product that will fit with them. You know, speaking about that industry experience, like having that kind of fit and being able to take that technology and plant it in there through something that they've created is the best pathway into a lot of the real world use case areas. But that's a long way down the road.
So two things. Firstly, a response to that question, Jonathan Ende is here, and he's probably the guy that we want to talk to. He's the member of the founding team who previously sold a company that did government documentation. Second thing I will say is that there are companies now using Ethereum, right? But that's hardened by the community using it first. So I think what will happen is that we'll have use cases which are attractive to the likes of us, right? Or the decentralized community, and then eventually will become adopted by the corporations. They're always a lot more slow moving. You know, so this is not a B2B or a B2G play. We want to make this B2C or, you know, community orientated first, because that's where you get the most amount of traction the most quickly.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, there's a really similar question to what his was, but I was wondering, you know, reserve was an obvious use case in high inflation countries that lack a fiat currency like Venezuela. With Nillion, do you see those obvious use cases like that as well? And it's similar to him. I mean, how do you decide which vertical to go after, or do you just, you were just saying, allow the community to grow and then let that kind of happen organically?
That's a great question. So, you know, that's a question we are addressing with engineering now, you know, because you got to kind of think about the initial use cases as you're building the network. You got to kind of guide the engineering team. we think that the use cases which are going to be the ones that we're going to approach first are the ones that we either have one interest by a founding entrepreneur to actually go after. So for myself, for example, I'm interested in a decentralized LastPass or my password. Jonathan is like a decentralized calls it biograph, a way to sign things in a decentralized way with your biometrics, right? And there are several others who have interest in things like identities, etc. Truth is that whatever is, I think, the easiest that occurs first within the engineering roadmap, which I think is going to be authentication, is going to be the first use case that someone can build off, and then thereafter, there's more complex types of authentication, computational authentication, layered authentication, all sorts of stuff like that, right? Storage, perhaps. So I feel like engineering will likely dictate the first use case, alongside a desire from someone to build that use case off it. So the Terra and Luna approach, coupled with what our spidey sense of crypto degen-ness says.
Yeah, is that where you're stacking probabilities again, or that's that?
Yeah, that's stacking probabilities, but that happened before. Having that strategy, and then having the people who are founding entrepreneurs, having the degens on our team, or the crypto experts, I should call them degens, but crypto experts, and then having the perspective of an ecosystem-first approach, having an engineering team that can inform us of what they believe is the most likely use case. And when we announce our CTO, I mean, he's built something that is used by pretty much everyone, right? And so he understands, this kind of framework. So it's a tension between those things. There isn't a easy answer to, hey, this is exactly what we're going to build first, and this is right? It's like saying, if you build Ethereum, is it Uniswap or ICOs or NFTs that all kind of, potentially could have been first. Same sort of thing here, but at least in this case, where we have that incubation. It's not even incubation; it's actual creation within our ecosystem, our foundation or ecosystem. Yeah. Thanks.
Question in the back.
There's a question in the back. Hey man.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
How are you doing? So 2018-19 bear market, I assume Hedera had probably a big price crash. Was there any execution pressure for the founding team or for just the engineers on just executing what needs to be done? And if there was, how do you guys handle it?
Can't answer that question because I wasn't there. So I wasn't part of that team. When you say execution pressure, though, you mean what exactly? You mean that they were discouraged from the
just the morale,
morale.
keeping the
Yes.
team
I do remember actually that I would check into the team a lot, but I do remember that during the depth of the winter there was some morale, some low morale, but people just got on with it, right? And I think now that's something that is going to be less of a problem because people are seeing these waves happen in crypto. So now I'm like, okay, we're kind of in a winter now, no problem. I understand that this is a part of this wave upwards. I still believe in the technology, and I would reinforce that as a leader to the team I was a part of. I mean, I think people just have to understand, and you have to make sure you paint the picture to the team that this is going to be a rosy. No business that hits massive amounts, is a rosy path upwards, right? And you just gotta have that as part of the culture as well. It's anti-fragility.
It seems like we're in a long sideways market now. The next bear markets, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, look, if it's bear or if it's bull, I don't care. I'm just building right now. I can't. If I was trading and if I was in my degen side, then I would care. But right now, I barely look at the price of things. I'm Oh, that's cool.
Or if we were launching a product that wasn't that innovative, a project that
That's
wasn't,
true,
didn't have a lot
yeah.
of innovation in it.
Yeah, and that's why waiting is really important, right? As you're waiting and waiting for the right project and product, you know, it's because this sort of product is anti-fragile, you know, it's just cool.
Got one last question from Omar Hamid on the live chat. He's wondering about the panelists' thoughts on the play-to-earn gaming wave. Has it come and gone?
What's that?
Later.
Wondering about the panelists' thoughts on the play-to-earn gaming wave. Has it come and gone?
Panel stocks?
No, play to earn.
Play-to-earn gaming wave.
Oh, no. Play-to-earn is here to stay. And, you know, it's just a question of being able to unseat the mighty Axie, right? And the founder of Axie is a friend of mine, so he would hate me saying that. But no one's going to unseat Axie. You know, there's a lot. I think that there are evolutions coming in that wave and in others that will be very interesting. Honestly, I've been heads down so much in this technology. I don't know too much about play to earn, but you know, happy to connect whoever it is to someone who can talk to them about it. I'm not this I used to be this industry oracle, but as I started focusing more, you kind of lose that a little bit. You know, it's just the reality of focus. Cool.
Okay, so a few things to wrap this up. We have the QR codes for Nillion. If you want to follow along the project, Telegram's the best way, Telegram and Discord. And so from your seats, you can actually take a picture of that and it'll actually link you into both of those channels. So if you want to follow, that'd be the first thing. Second thing is, every time we've come to a university like this, we've walked away hiring like a couple people, not usually planned, it just happens. And so if you guys are interested about talking more about Nillion, talking about what we're looking for, the entire team's going to be at the beer garden pretty much next door for the next hour and a half. We have a bar tab there, so you guys can come grab a drink, talk to us. Doesn't have to be about Nillion, but we'll be there. And you know, I'd say to wrap this up, you know, it's great you guys are interested in this space. It's fast moving, it's interesting, and you know, I would recommend just keep your finger on these kind of events and things like this. You know, this is how you kind of get into, you know, people always wonder, like, how do I get in like early? You know, it's stuff like this, right? And you find something interesting, it resonates with you, you latch onto it, and next thing you know, it becomes like something big and you were there like from the ground level. So that's why we're doing a lot of these talks. But I wanted to thank you guys for coming out. You know, it's been a big day for us to put this all together, and happy to meet you guys and happy to see you guys at the beer garden after this. Thanks.